Okay. So sustainable environments in Monteverde, testing, testing. It worked. Okay. So Philadelphia is the sixth largest city in the US. It's home to 1.5 million people, and the metro area is about 5 million people. So we came to San Jose on May 31st, and the students are leaving this Saturday, the 27th, for a total of 28 days. And from San Jose, we made our way to the wonderful Monteverde Institute, which has been a very collaborative, welcoming, and sustainable campus and experience. So each of the students has been working on a project, and each of them is going to present their findings. So we'll have Aiden speaking about ecological footprints, Ainsley talking about buen vivir and poetry and song, Khalida talking about some of the insights and lessons we learned from speakers throughout the trip. Natalie is going to be highlighting a biography that she did with Eladio Cruz here at MVI. Morgan will talk about tree planting and make some comparisons to Philadelphia, and then Ava will end our presentation with some wildlife sightings and how we can see wildlife in Philadelphia. Okay, so without further ado, Aiden?
Buenos dias. My name is Aiden. I'm a journalism student at Temple, and I'm going to talk a little bit about ecological footprints in the US versus in Costa Rica. So, to think about using resources, how we use resources in the US versus how we use them in Costa Rica, we can use this measurement of ecological footprint per person. So ecological footprint is measured in hectares, which for context is about 2.5 acres, or the size of a large soccer field, large football pitch. Um, and ecological footprint calculates the area that's required to produce the resources and collect the waste from a person, a group of people, or a large population. So we use data from this website, the Global Footprint Network, which tracks resource usage across different countries, and global footprints, or ecological footprints, sorry, across different parts of the world. And as you can see in these two graphs, this first one shows the ecological footprint of Costa Rica. And as you can see, it says here 2.5, which means that the average person in Costa Rica uses in 1 year 2.5 hectares worth of resources. As you can see, in the US, our usage is a lot higher, at almost 7.5 hectares per person. So the average American uses 5 hectares more resources in a year than the average person in Costa Rica. And I think when we look a little bit deeper into this, there are some obvious explanations, but there are also some things that the data doesn't tell us. So the first thing I think I wanted to point out was that Costa Rica's footprint has remained pretty constant for a very long time. As you can see in 1960, when this data started being collected, the footprint, meaning the usage of resources, is about the same as it is now. So throughout a period of almost 60 years, usage of resources in Costa Rica hasn't really changed. Whereas you can see in the US, even though our numbers are pretty high now, they've been much higher in the past. And during the 80s and 90s, resource usage in the US was at its highest, with the average individual using 12 hectares of resources in a year. Only in 2008, following the financial crisis in the US, did resource usage drop to below 10 hectares per person and stay there. So as you can see now, we're at the lowest number we've ever been at, but we're still using far more resources than is necessary and far more resources than the average person would in Costa Rica. I think the second thing that I wanted to point out was that in Costa Rica, during that same period of time, during the financial crisis, resource usage was not as affected. So while in the US, resource usage dropped over 3 hectares per person during the financial crisis, Costa Rica it remained pretty similar, dropping about half of a hectare. Um, the larger difference you can see in Costa Rica's footprint is in the 90s when there was an influx of tourism in the country, meaning there was an increase in the amount of resources required for each person. So as you can see here, the ecological footprint in 1990 was 2.23 hectares per person in Costa Rica. By 1996, that had jumped up to 3.4, reflecting a need for more resources to accommodate the number of foreign people coming to visit the country. Um, like I said, the data shows that the average American consumes far more resources than the average Costa Rican, but this isn't the full picture. It doesn't necessarily tell us why. And these numbers are somewhat inaccurate when we look at the US's footprint. So, for context, I did a quiz to see what my footprint is as an average college student. And according to the quiz, my resource usage is at 4.8 hectares per year, which is, while much higher than the average person in Costa Rica, it's still lower than the number that is given as an average for the US. And the reason for this is that resource usage in the US is not distributed evenly among our population. Um, while recently the US produced the world's first trillionaire, over 30 million people in the United States live below the poverty line. And despite the fact that the most wealthy people in our society use the most of our resources, when this metric is used, it calculates resource usage as even. So it would say this metric counts an Elon Musk or a Jeff Bezos as using the same amount of resources as someone living under the federal poverty line in the US. So obviously there's some inaccuracies with the data. Um, I think the reasons for differences in resource usage come down to cultural differences. In the US, we have a society that is built on overconsumption. Um, it's not just something that is normalized in the US, but it's expected and encouraged that you consume as many resources as possible. And especially in the US, it's seen as a measure of success when you're able to access unlimited resources. We see that as having reached the peak of our society. And so simple things like, whereas in the US, we're encouraged to use as much as we can and not worry about waste. Simple differences in Costa Rica, like not constantly using climate control inside of houses, throwing away food waste. These are simple practices that aren't as common, aren't as popular in the US because our society does not value, or our society values consumption far more than sustainable use of resources. I think that if we, as Americans, want to bring our footprint from here at 7.5 hectares per person, which is a really unsustainable use of resources, I think the recommended number per person is 1.5. So we're using as Americans 6 hectares more resources per year than is recommended and as sustainable. I think if we want to get to a point like here in Costa Rica where there's a slightly more sustainable use of resources, there's a larger cultural shift that is required, a larger shift in people's mindsets that's required. And I think this will take a lot of time, but it's definitely achievable. So yeah, that's it.
Okay, hola. My name is Ainsley, and I also was kind of interested in those cultural differences that Aiden was talking about, that create kind of like a culture of care about the environment, and a reason for maybe those differences and people's effects on the environment. Oh, yes. Um, so to start, I thought I would bring up kind of what inspired my portion of the project, which was a talk with Vincent Delgado, where we talked about the concept of buen vivir. So in the States, when we learn about sustainability, we learn about it as like the 3 Ps or the 3 pillars, which is people, planet, and sorry, I'm nervous, so I forgot. And profit, which is the one that we're kind of like, why would profit be included? Why would profit be included when we're talking about sustainability, when we're talking about the environment? So, Buen Vivir is kind of like another economic framework that doesn't involve that profit aspect. So, the concept of Buen Vivir is essentially good living, and the principles of Buen Vivir are to be with oneself, with society, with the natural, with the spirits and the deities, and with the cosmos. Um, so with that, sorry, I'm gonna scroll down. I, I began to look into the origins of this concept, and I found that it's an indigenous Andean tradition, and it challenges Western models of development that prioritize endless growth and emphasize instead that the earth has limits. A specific quote from Buen Vivir that I remember is, "The earth has feelings and the earth has limits." So it kind of includes the earth in the economic model, um, and says that it's part of our society, it's part of who we are, and we cannot push it away. We kind of need to think of it as one of our own, as part of our community, if you will. So during our class with Vincent Delgado, we spoke about this poetry, Las Piedras, which is stones in English, and we thought that it was very interesting how this poem kind of included the earth as like a part of human life, as a part of our lives. Um, and I found that very interesting. And I feel like a lot of Buen Vivir concepts are definitely found here in Costa Rica. And so throughout my time here, I started trying to explore ways that similar poetry or similar song or similar concepts were found in Costa Rican poetry and Costa Rican culture. So my research was pretty much just asking around and talking to people and listening to music and looking up things. I remember there were poems that we saw on like the side of barns at farms that we visited. I talked to people like Gabby about songs that they may have listened to when they were younger, or even my host mom about anthems that they may have learned in school. And the song that I came up with that I thought kind of represented this Buen Vivir mindset within Costa Rican culture is from a band called Mal Pais. They're from San Jose. And basically, the song is called Mira a tu alrededor. And it's about society's relationship with the earth, within Costa Rica specifically. So I have some lyrics here. This is kind of the chorus, roughly the chorus of the song, and it's repeated twice. And I thought it was interesting how, similarly to the Stones poem, it includes the earth as like one of our own. Like, we are one with the earth, and the earth is part of our community and part of our society, and that is why we should care for it. And I believe that that's a little bit of the reason that there is this cultural difference in the way that we care about the environment. Because when you have rhetoric or speech like this that is common within your society, when it's common to talk about nature as like one of your own, it creates this culture of care. It creates this genuine belief that you are one with the environment, and it leads to the environment being included within our economy, within our communities, within what we think about in our day-to-day lives. And I think that that has a lot to do with why, on the daily, people are willing to be considerate of the environment and consider their footprint and include nature as one of their own. So that's what I learned here in Costa Rica, and that's what I think is important to take back to Philadelphia, um, and start to kind of include in our culture what we learned here in Costa Rica's culture. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Okay, so throughout our stay here in Monteverde, Costa Rica, we have been fortunate enough to have been guided by 10 amazing people, as well as had some very meaningful conversations. Here's displayed some of our work that we did throughout the past month. From farmers, biologists, naturalist guides, environmental educators, core klima representatives, and many more. Together, the speakers talked about modern humans' disconnect with nature, something that is a big problem in the United States, but especially in big cities such as Philadelphia. Our experience here has been eye-opening, seeing how many people in so many fields are so integrated and connected with the nature and work that they do. People here intrinsically care more because they exist within nature, not outside of it. For example, Orlando, who took us on a hike in Santa Elena Reserve, emphasized how connecting with nature is therapy and essential for everyone. This is something most of you would assume is common knowledge, but it is not in many parts of the world, especially where we're from. Irene from Corklima taught us about circular economies and local economies in Monteverde and invited us to imagine what it would be like to have all the trash we ever produced back in our homes. Here's in the middle is a picture of the workshop that we did. In many places, our trash disappears and we never see it again, making it easy for us to not worry or care about it once it enters the bin. Challenging individuals to envision all of their trash within their homes can promote change in terms of how we are disposing of it, because it never really disappears. This is something we will apply to our work back in Philadelphia, and something I will continue to remind myself within my studies. As she said, it's better to have 100 people practicing sustainability in an imperfect way rather than 10 practicing in a perfect way. We don't need to hyperfixate on doing it perfectly, but instead to fixate on all humans doing the best they can within their means. The idea is to do the best we can, not to struggle, she stated. Throughout our tour of the coffee farm, Life Monteverde, Guillermo brought up a great point. We are used to pressing buttons and getting what we want, but nature doesn't work that way, and it takes time to see change. Sustainable practices and working hard to protect our planet may not show results immediately, but that does not mean it's not helping. These wonderful people have gifted us knowledge and wisdom that we will all carry back home. In a world that can be disheartening, our stay in Costa Rica has motivated us to keep fighting to be a voice in protecting our home. Thank you.
Buenos días. My name is Natalie, and I'm a master's student studying sustainability and biodiversity conservation. So in my time in Costa Rica, very quickly learned that this is a community of doers. This is a community of people who see a problem and do something about it, who see a gap and take care of it. And one of these people is Eladio Cruz, who I'm sure a lot of you know. I had the pleasure of interviewing Eladio and learning a bit more about his story. So Eladio was born in 1948 in San Luis on a subsistence farm with his siblings and his parents. So they grew most of what they ate. They shared excess resources with their community, and that was very much the lifestyle in that time. When he was just 14, he moved to Monteverde with his older brother to work on Wolf Guindon's farm. And during that time, Guindon was starting to get a lot more, there was a lot more research coming out that the dairy industry was very damaging to the ecosystems here, and deforestation was kind of destroying the place. So Eladio and Guindon started dedicating themselves to conservation. They started planting trees, they started creating trails, they supported a lot of researchers who would come here trying to understand the ecosystem and figure out what they could do to help. And so this is one of the really impactful images that he shared with me. This is Laguna Pocosol in the Children's Eternal Rainforest, really deforested in 1987. You can see there's like not very many trees in the background versus he took this picture I think 2 weeks ago. The same laguna with so many more trees. This is all second growth forest that he and his team have worked to reforest. And you can see that in just a couple of decades, this is an immense difference, and this is just one spot of a whole bunch of Monteverde. He himself did a lot of research on the local flora, and he was one of the last people to see the now extinct sapo dorado. So he shared with me that he was very, very passionate about this, and he just innately cared about nature, innately wanted to work in conservation. But when he began this work that was not the case with most of the community. Most of the community was really divided. He lost many friendships along the way. Um, and the way of living was subsistence farming. So it was really scary for farmers to think they had to sell their land and have no way of making a living or providing for their family. So for a very long time, the shift from dairy farming to conservation was deeply, deeply dividing. And there was a need for a shift in community perspective, in economy, in the system. A lot of different and complicated shifts needed to happen in order to get to the Monteverde that we have today. But that shift would not have been possible without their persistence and hard work. They dedicated their lives to this. They began instilling love of nature in other people, so the movement grew. And stories like Elalio's are proof that large systemic change like this is in fact possible. So today he runs the nursery at the Monteverde Institute, and this is a picture of him in his nursery, proudly showing off his trees. This year alone, they've grown and given away 10,500 trees, and we're just halfway through 2026. Since the 1990s, they've planted over 300,000 trees, so they've played an enormous role in reforesting the area. And most of these trees are endemic or endangered, so they've really helped bring those populations back. It's because of work like this that we are where we are today, and that students like us get to come and see these beautiful ecosystems. So it was really an honor to get to talk to Elalio, and I only have 5 minutes up here, so this does not do it justice, but I encourage you all to read the longer bio that is much more complete and has his whole story, with lots of images and his farm when he was younger, deforested versus reforested. Yeah, I encourage everyone to take a look at that if they get a chance. Thank you.
All right, hi everyone. My name's Morgan. I'm an environmental studies major, and for this project, I focused in on tree planting and the differences that I've seen here versus in Philadelphia. So, giving off some context, some backstory, Philly is a very large city. It is basically the definition of a concrete jungle in most places. This is a view of near our campus. You can walk for 5 blocks and not see a single tree. Um, Over here is a map of Philly. The darker blue is the hotter areas, and the green shows the forest or the tree canopy, I guess. As you can see, there's very little green. Um, so this is a really big problem because in Philly, we have something called the urban heat island effect, which is when all of the buildings, the concrete, the asphalt basically absorbs the heat and makes the city up to 20 degrees hotter Fahrenheit or 6.7 degrees hotter Celsius. Um, this is a really big issue because um, deaths from heat occur more in Philly than deaths from any other natural disaster combined. So this is something we're definitely trying to combat. There's also a lot of air pollution, no trees, very bad air quality, which leads to respiratory issues. Um, because of this, in 2023, the city of Philadelphia came up with the tree plan to basically start planting trees as much as possible, especially in these hotter areas, to help alleviate some of the risks from the vulnerable communities, such as children, the elderly, people that are sick. But it's very slow progress. We're working on it, but it is really slow. And it's very difficult because we're kind of just trying to fit the trees in where we can. Versus here in Monteverde and in Costa Rica in general, which we learned a lot about the incredible history of the reforestation of the country. I got the chance to talk to Daniela, and we had a whole workshop with her learning about the tree nursery and everything. And one of the main differences, or some of the key points of the tree planting here in Monteverde that she talked to me about was the goal is to restore the ecosystems and the forest, not just plant the trees for what they can do for us humans. So she said that they only plant native trees. They put them in very specific spots. to help with the bellbird biological corridor. They focus on species that can help restore the nutrients of the soil, etc. All with taking care of the earth as like the central driving focus. Whereas in Philly, it's very human centered, um, which hopefully, after seeing how it has been done here, I hope that back in Philly, while we're making slow progress, we can slowly and gradually shift to getting towards getting away from focusing on what the trees can do for us humans, but instead what we can do for the earth and for our city by planting the trees. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Ava. I'm a pharmaceutical studies student at Temple also. And I really love birds a lot and animals in general. And throughout the trip, I've been keeping a life list of pretty much all of the animals that we've seen. And it's mostly for my own personal records. But while I was recording these animals, I noticed that a lot of them are taxonomically related to animals that we also have in Philadelphia. So I just wanted to share a few of the animals that have relatives where we're from so that people who may not have been to Philadelphia before can maybe think of some connections and similarities between our areas. And for people from Philly or have been to Philly, um, there are similarities here. Just the connections I thought were really cool. So I'll start. All right, I'll start with the gallery. Oh my god. Okay. So this is the first animal we saw, the brown blob. um, yeah, you're good. Oh, well, okay, okay, perfect. So one of the very first animals we saw on this trip was a variegated squirrel, and I also learned the common names in Spanish for these. So this is just an ardilla. So cute. Um, you can see it has red on the bottom and green on the top. And in Philly, we also have squirrels. They're a little bit more boring looking, but they're part of the same genus. They share a recent common ancestor and characteristics, so they were grouped together. But this is the eastern gray squirrel. And they eat the same things. You can find them in urban, suburban areas, both of them. I wish these ones were a little bit more red and cool looking, but we can't always get what we want. Um, the next animal that we saw was actually en route to Jaco. When we were driving past Punta Arenas, we saw these white-winged doves, um, and they were so cute. And they were just walking along the street. And so we also have doves in the United States, the mourning dove. And what was I going to say? These ones are pretty iconic in the United States because of the sound that they make. It kind of sounds like somebody crying, but for a lot of people from our area, it's a very nostalgic sound. But again, similar diets, similar places you can find them, kind of more open areas. And yeah. And then the next bird was the tropical kingbird, pecho amarillo. So cute. Um, they're flycatchers, so they like to hang out around open areas and then swoop in and catch insects, and that's how they get their lunch. So these ones as is the trend, are much more colorful than the ones we have in Philadelphia, but we do have a relative. This is the Eastern kingbird. And I just want to give credit where credit is due. I got this picture from eBird. I did not take this. um, anyway, again, it's a flycatcher. It stalks around and gets bugs to eat. It's kind of the emo cousin of the one down here, but they're both very adorable, in my opinion. So the next animal that we have is the white-nosed coati down here. Photo creds to Kalita for the amazing pic. um, so these guys like eating trash, and they like eating anything. And the relatives we have in the United States are the same because we have raccoons. There's also raccoons down here, but I didn't want to put the same animal twice because that would be boring. So I put something that was still taxonomically related, but my boyfriend's mom took this photo. She loves raccoons. But in Philadelphia, we see them terrorizing bird feeders and digging in dumpsters and living in sewers and eating anything. So, pretty similar to the ones down here. And the last animal that I picked was Costa Rica's national bird, the clay-colored thrush. Um, I really like the calls and the songs that they make. They're very beautiful. And I also really enjoyed learning about the legend associated with them, which is that they sing before it rains. So for a long time, farmers thought their singing caused the rain to come. But here's one with the nest in the greenhouse that Eladio runs actually. Um, couldn't see if there were any babies in there, but anyway, this is the one time the bird that we have is more colorful because we have American robins in the same genus. Their songs are very similar, and they also like to eat like small bugs, berries, that kind of thing, and they're very cute. But um, those are the 5 animals that I picked out, but other ones that I thought were pretty notable for us that we saw that did not have relatives in Philadelphia were the resplendent quetzal, the purple-throated mountain gem, a cicada in the middle of metamorphosis during the day, which is rare, our guide told us, a 3-wattled bellbird, a pale-billed woodpecker, and a rufous-eyed stream frog. And it was a mom that had eggs, and she was so cute. Anyway, we got pretty lucky. Still looking for my toucan, but I'll get there. And here's a little table with common names, scientific names, and where in Costa Rica we saw all of these critters. So that's it. Thank you.
Okay, thanks to all of the students for presenting, and thank you again for everyone for coming today. It's really wonderful to have you here, especially the families who have been hosting the students. Thank you so much. Alejandra, who helped develop the program, who took the lead in developing the program. Himina, who is here, who has been our coordinator, and Gabriella as well, who's been coordinating with the homestay families. So thank you all so much. And we look forward to mingling and having lunch together.